This is A Becoming Creature. On this podcast, Robert and I discussed the value of magical thinking, the importance of emotional connection during COVID-19, the meaning of love, how to empathize better, the dangers of doing philosophy, how Christianity might be a cope, and so much more. We hope you enjoy. This is your host, Nick, and I'm here with Robert, also known as @Childermass4 on Twitter. So how you doing, Robert?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good today. Thanks for asking.
So who is Robert?
I've been studying philosophy on my own for almost 7 years now. Jesus. And I've been pretty interested in reading and all that my entire life. Right now, I'm on Twitter trying to write my blog, but failing horribly at it, and new friends.
Rad. So what kind of role has philosophy played in your life? Like, in what way do you interact with philosophy, and in what way do you have a relationship with philosophy?
This is a very difficult question to answer because, first of all, what do we consider philosophy, and our non-formal, philosophical systems, everyday rules and such, are those philosophical systems? Because I think the first time I really thought about philosophy and such was I was learning to be a judge for a children's card game called Magic the Gathering. As a that, you have to learn the rules of both the game and how to handle the events.
Yeah.
Those rules, they explain why they have those rules. For me, this was very eye-opening to a 15-year-old who had never had any responsibilities before, because, I understood that rules are there often for a reason, which, is a big moment in anyone's development, understanding the necessity of rules for a good living.
So what did that introduce to you, or what problems were you struggling with and trying to solve at that early age?
Well, I mean, I think these are very relatable for everyone. As a teenager, you want independence, and you got parents hounding stuff over you, and you don't want to be hounded over.
Right.
But that experience really made me understand that the necessity of rules, like I said before. And I think it was a big philosophical moment of, recognizing a bit my place in the world, and discovering a little who I am. And it's just so funny to think that it was not triggered by one of the epics, but by the rules of a children's card game.
So later on in life, so as you started studying philosophy and getting more deep into kind of interpreting the world and the rules of the world and the rules of human nature and all of that, what did that do for you? Like, how did that play a role in your life?
A couple of years later, I was oh my God, it's so embarrassing. I was an atheist and hardcore social justice warrior type, who asked his friends not to say gay.
Right.
And I was browsing image boards a lot during those days, and as any good intellectual, I was told to start out with the Greeks, who I absolutely did not appreciate that age. I don't even remember why. I really don't. But I picked up Kierkegaard, specifically his work Fear and Trembling, and it really shook me. And I never got over reading Fear and Trembling when I was 19 years old. It shook me out of my atheism pretty bad. I tried to be a Christian. Didn't work out. But it opened all these doors around me, that maybe there's more to this world than, just matter interacting. Because
right.
I'm from Estonia, and Estonia is one of the most atheist countries in the world. We are a bunch of peasants who
Yeah.
only care about, next year's harvest in a metaphorical way. We've been invaded so many times, and everyone's trying to push their religion, and we just kind of shrug and go along. We're unusually resistant to religion. When
Well,
I was
I don't know a lot about Estonia and Estonians. So do you mind just kind of like painting that for us? Like, what's it like living in Estonia and growing up in Estonia, and how
well,
might that be different from somebody that grew up elsewhere?
well, I mean, it's really hard. It's really hard for me to say what's different about growing up in Estonia because it's like water to me.
Right.
But I think I even had a kind of an unusual upbringing for in Estonia. But for example, when I asked from my mom at 5 years of age if God is real, she answered me, it is if you want him to be.
Mm.
And my dad, I don't think I have ever talked about religion with my dad. And I think that's more representative of what it means to be an Estonian. We just kind of don't care. We're very practically minded. And this is what
Mm.
Kierkegaard opened up for me, is this another world, because I am much more suited to thinking in soft-minded matters of esoteric things and magic and thought constructs. I'm simply much better at navigating those things, and I'm naturally drawn towards them. So
Okay, so you were an atheist and you started reading Kierkegaard, and then
yeah,
what happened?
I guess it didn't make me believe right away reading Kierkegaard, because
Mm-hmm.
old habits die hard. But
Mm-hmm.
definitely before that, I didn't understand why anyone would really even believe in God and go to church and do all that. I just thought it was kind of silly, role playing and stuff. But
Mm.
it made me, well, to put it in kind of a reductive way, it made me understand the psychology maybe of a religious person and why that might be important. And I read the Bible pretty carefully, and I read some supplementary materials. And I still, to this very, very day, I appreciate it so much as a work of literature and as a and as a book of politics as well. What actually happened was that one day I don't even remember why, but I was in the city. Two people approached me and asked if I wanted to learn about the Word of God. And since
Mm.
I had been reading Kierkegaard at that point, I was so on board. And
Wow.
we did a couple of Bible sessions. They were a bunch of heretics from Korea. They have their own cult thing. And
Uh-huh.
while I did enjoy sitting and learning with them, they were quite nice people. I I think I am a bit too much of a fierce individualist to submit submit myself
Mm-hmm.
to a cult like that, because Protestantism has ruined me, and I need
Right.
to have a very personal relationship with God. I'm not trying to belittle anyone who has their faith told to them. Absolutely not.
Right.
Needing to verify everything myself can get tough sometimes.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, what was the outcome? Did you have, some personal growth, any insights? Like what came thereafter?
I kind of drifted away from the cult couple, and my real life kept on going.
Mm-hmm.
And oh my god, I was a very nasty person during my teenage years, and I think reading philosophy really softened me up a lot. And it's a funny story. Actually, what made me realize how much of a jerk I was being was I was talking to our mutual friend Snuv, who is, I think,
Mm-hmm.
at corporate. It
Yeah.
was way before. It was like many years ago, and we got into a argument, and
Oh, okay.
I stuck to my guns to a very insensitive extent about a soft event
Mm-hmm.
in his life. And we just stopped talking after that. And I kind of felt bitter about it. But now that I think back, it really was the moment when I realized that maybe I need to change how I
Right.
interact with people. And I do think that reading philosophy made me more aware of what I want out of life and what is good.
Tell me more about that. So you did some work, right, to get to this point, to figure out
Mm.
what's more meaningful in life and what you do want. Do you have any, I guess, any tools or anything that you use on a regular basis? It could be a habit or anything that you do with philosophy in order to live a better life.
I think definitely one of the big habits that I have right now, magical thinking, which it's very hard to describe if you don't already know what it is. But
Hmm.
one of my favorite definitions is any non-standard causality, which basically means that you make up stuff in your head, you believe that the stuff you just made up is capable of affecting the world, and then because of your beliefs, you actually act different and make it come true, which is self-fulfilling prophecy as a trope. This is a tool that I would not have without philosophy, and that is such an integral part of my life. As an anecdote, I was trying to get hired for a job, and I went to a job interview with the attitude that I'm going to nail this job interview and I'm going to get the job. I didn't get the job, and my
Hmm.
mom told me that, oh, you must be so sad about it that you didn't get the job because you were so confident in it. And I just wasn't sad. I knew that this was a magical thinking thing. It was a spell that I cast on myself to
Right.
make me confident and to make me do better during the interview. It's about using your own will
Yeah.
to
It
to
sounds like my interpretation of what you're saying is basically that if you believe that the universe is working with you rather than working against you, then magical things can happen and you can have more agency in your life.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a very good way to put it. Of course, this is a very everyday use of that concept, and there are much more you know unsightly and interesting things, but these should be still taken very seriously. I actually had a very interesting event that again changed my mind about how I think about these magic stuff. I was writing for NaNoWriMo, I think it's called. It's where
Hmm.
you try to
Yeah.
write a novel in 1 month.
Yeah.
And I was writing a novel about summoning demons.
Hmm.
And I was about 4 days into writing it when I started to have such horrible nightmares. Like these, I am very open to new experiences, and I
Yeah.
I really like feeling new things, even if it's kind of nasty. But these were so terrible. I got 4 hours of sleep every night, and
Wow.
it made me realize that this is not something that, like, this magic stuff is not something that one should take lightly at all.
Right.
It's serious. You can cause yourself very real damage. And I basically took the manuscript, I deleted it from everywhere,
Wow.
and it took a week for me to sleep again 8 hours without nightmares. Still to this day, I am like very sensitive to caffeine and and other stimulants because of that. So
Wow. Yeah, it's almost as if once you open certain doors, you can no longer close them. Would you say this is true for philosophy at large? Like, for example, do you think everybody should do philosophy? And there are dangers to practicing this magical thinking, but do you think there are also dangers in studying philosophy?
Well, I mean, I do think that I take it back. I am unsure if everyone should do philosophy.
Hmm.
I am still young and stupid. I have my very strong opinions, but uh, but
Right.
I'm not willing to, bet money on this. But in some ways, everyone already is doing philosophy by, acting in certain ways and choosing to form certain habits. But if we are talking about formal philosophy, then I don't think everyone has the temperament for it.
Hmm.
I I think that for most of human history, most people have gotten their, opinions delivered to them on a platter and informed very strongly by the culture they are in. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think if if you want to live a happy and fulfilling life, believing the same thing that other people believe around you is a good thing. It's a very instructive example of this are the churches in America, where people genuinely can rely on each other more, and they have more trust in each other because of their shared beliefs and values, and it lets them live happier and more fulfilling lives. And there, of course, are drawbacks if you don't control, what comes into you, information diet wise, you can end
Yeah.
up in that space and you can be exploited, and there can again be some very real damage. But I'm not convinced that everyone should come up with their own specific, philosophical system and stick by it. It just doesn't seem like a good way to live for everyone.
This reminds me of something by Camus that was A Summer in Algiers. And he raises a dichotomy between the people that are younger than 30, which are savoring life to the maximum. They have this paradise, they have this beautiful land. The friends are spending time with each other constantly, and they're always swimming and sunbathing and making fun of one another. And then he says that after 30, everybody just becomes melancholic, that everybody just um, gives up in a certain way, and they just lead out the rest of their lives in a quiet and reserved way. And it seems to me that applying philosophy, before 30 in this case, um, is kind of pointless because you're already enjoying life to the best of your ability, right? You don't need to overthink it. But once these people were going past 30 and they didn't have the time to go out and have fun with friends, and life changed, I feel like when you look at something like that, suddenly philosophy can actually have value. Do you think this like applies to other situations? I think it's something valuable.
I have two remarks, two very good remarks. It's a good story. Two remarks on this. First is that once you're 30, you might not even need philosophy because, well, that's a bit of a normative statement. But you should have
Hmm.
children once you're 30. Like you really should. And I
I'll take
think
that to heart.
you should have children when you're 30, and that should replace the swimming and the sunshine, and all the carefree fun you have. Because
Right.
I don't have children myself. I really
Hmm.
would like to one day, but my friends who have children, it just seems fulfilling in a way that these carefree pleasures just aren't.
Yeah.
Uh, this of course doesn't mean that you shouldn't do philosophy after you have
Right.
kids, because you got to raise your kids right, and
Right. Right.
gotta make sure that you give them the best ideas that are possible. But the other thing is, increasingly, I think young people are unable to have that kind of life. Maybe this is just like attracts like, but many of my friends who are my age are
Hmm.
really struggling with finding a place, and they just don't have this sort of carefree life anymore.
It almost seems as if one's pursuit of meaning has to evolve over time because just kind of like the impermanence of the human life, and that people need to look at their current situation at any given time within the context of the stretching future and their own life, and make those choices for themselves. But those choices could change over time,
yeah. You just unpacked the oldest philosophical nugget. Know yourself,
right,
which is at the core of ethical philosophy. But I on the subject of young people and philosophy, I myself had a bad life event. Let's put it like that. And I kind of blew my life up and went into self-exile and was generally a nuisance to my family. But in that time, the friend philosophy means philosophia, a friend to wisdom. And during that time, my only friend, was wisdom. And it gave me great solace, to have something to spend time on that I felt like was worthy spending time on. It really seemed like a noble pursuit to these works and to try to understand them. They definitely have helped a bit, but I do wonder if maybe I read them too soon. and
why would that be? Like, how could one read it too soon? Like, what does that mean?
It's difficult to describe a lack of something, because if you knew what was lacking, you could, already fulfill it. But I do feel that a lot of philosophy that I read, maybe goes over my head. It's a bit too much, but I fail to grasp why this exactly is important. And the older I get, the more and more the pieces start to click together. So this is why we need an ontology. So this is why we need to do that, and that. And it feels like there are still a lot of pieces missing that can't be just fulfilled by reading more. They have to be informed by life experiences and going outside and doing things and failing things and understand why philosophy even is important. Because to really get something out of philosophy, you have to want to read those things. You have to want to get things out of it. You have to, do it with a passion and a love for those things. And this maybe ties into why not everyone should do philosophy, because maybe not everyone can muster this kind of love for learning these things. And maybe they are better off about learning about life by simply doing and experimenting and experiencing stuff,
Right. It's almost as if the study of philosophy has to be meaningful to start with. Like, you need to be either trying to solve a problem, or you have to be hungry for knowledge. There has to be some cause. And without that, then it might just be empty as any book that an English teacher might assign their student. And then, 90% of the students aren't enjoying it, especially because they didn't pursue it for their own good.
This is a very good analogy. And I think oftentimes philosophy is read because, I know I did. I read Plato and Aristotle because I was told that I should read them. And and I've come back to Plato, and it has been a completely different experience. My copy of the Republic is full of notes, and I get a lot of joy out of the ironic touches.
Right. What I wonder, do you think that's from age, or do you think it's from having developed an understanding for the reading of philosophy itself, and so you can go back and read it more deeply?
Well, if I had to guess, I think it was I really do think it's age, but
Oh yeah.
you can never know these things because I am still in the process of aging and developing these muscles and understanding more things. So it's it's hard to know these things. Like if I knew it perfectly, then the problem wouldn't exist. If I knew the answer to that problem, then it would cease to be a problem, if that makes sense.
Right. Right. I totally understand what you mean. So there's this idea of having like a beginner's mind that I would describe as coming from a place of humility. And then you have kind of the expert's mind, or I don't know another way of putting it, but you can also come at things from this point of confidence. In what way do you think a person should approach philosophy as someone that's well read? How do these things interact?
I myself definitely am very confident in my beliefs and that they are good and that they are true because I have put them to the test and they have led me towards a better life. If someone shows me a better way or a better philosophy than what I have right now, then I will test it out and dip my toes into it, so to speak. And of course, I'll try it out. But I am fairly confident that, to borrow a kind of a charge phrase, but under my material conditions, I believe that the beliefs that I hold right now are almost the best that I could hold.
So why do you think that they are some of the best ideas or best beliefs you can have? Is it because they've been improved through an iterating process, or is it something else?
I think the sort of iterative thing is very, very crucial. Yes, they have been. I know how to apply my philosophical ideas. I am very familiar with them. They feel right in my hand. It's like having what's it called? A musical instrument that you know how to play in your hands, and it just comes very naturally to you. But also, it is. I treat philosophies exactly like I would a tool. It is to be applied, and if it ceases to be useful for a specific problem, it is okay to put it aside and reach for a new set of tools or a new philosophy in this case. And for example, well, there are certain philosophical strands that I really detest, like utilitarianism, but it still is useful to apply every once in a while in some abstract conditions. I might hate it, but I will not renounce its usefulness. But I will say that it is very often misused.
So if somebody's listening to this and they consider themselves utilitarians, what is your argument for what's wrong with that ideology, or what's wrong with that approach?
My honest first response is that you're not worth arguing with. I'm sorry. We could talk about something else, but I don't think there's going to be a productive conversation. But secondly, I think
would you recommend a book to them?
Nah. They'll find their own way out if they're.
Well, at least you have some. It's interesting because it's like you have a lot of faith in them, but also no faith in them.
Well, I mean, if they're, but here's the thing. I'll give you an actual argument after this. But sure. Here's the thing: if they are utilitarians and they are happy with their system, then like they're happy with their system. I mean, right. Who am I to tell them that their system, doesn't work for them? Right, like this is very much a matter of personal temperament. Every person has to make their own life bearable, however they wish. Of course, this isn't a call to be deeply selfish, because I believe that if you are deeply selfish, you do damage to yourself in very bad ways. Things like hypocrisy and maybe even hurting yourself or hurting others maliciously can sometimes be the better of two available options. And I think it is, of course, these are, not the best options, but those might be the best options available to that person at that moment. And I think that any utilitarian who is confident in their beliefs and happy with their life and how they're living it should, pay no heed to me mocking them.
Right. So my follow-up question here is, it sounds like you approach philosophy from a standpoint of confidence. So from where you're standing right now, how do you kind of self-correct and how do you integrate new ideas that you come across? So how do you choose what to integrate and what not to? And if you're already confident in what you believe, how do you change things up?
I need to think how I have changed my mind this year. That's a tough question. So I have two answers for your question. One is a little snippet, which really doesn't matter. It's like a small opinion, but which I completely reversed, or maybe not completely reversed, but strongly changed my opinion on. And one is how I tested out an idea which, I had a piece missing. I didn't really understand, and then I discovered that piece. So the first thing is, when COVID started, I was for the lockdowns. I thought that the government should have closed down earlier, and that the lockdowns were a good idea. Then I kind of, I drifted along the lockdowns. It was not a good time for me.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a good time for anyone. And seeing the aftermath of these lockdowns and how much psychic damage was caused by them, I really don't know if it was the correct choice to do so, because people truly are absolutely mentally exhausted. And there is this, I say on Twitter that it's, bad air that's causing all this. And there truly is something bad in the air. And the lockdown just, yeah. I'm going to sound like a new age kook, but it's bad energy up there. The planets are aligned wrong, and the lockdowns definitely contributed so much to that feeling. And there is so much pain caused by all these people not being able to go out and have fun and live their lives. I have a friend with a very young kid, and the very young kid, can't go into the post office and, sort their letters because they're afraid of COVID. Like, that is no way for a child to grow up. And it is devastating for so many people. I just didn't consider it. I didn't consider the psychic cost of the lockdowns. And once I started to realize the extent of the suffering, I'm like, no, I'm changing my mind on this. I'm pretty sure that I was wrong, and there was that. Basically,
I'm going to dig into that a little bit, right? So it sounds like you were very pro lockdown in the beginning because you were seeing it from like this philosophy of harm to life and harm to the elderly and harm to the sick and a harm perspective. But then you changed your interpretation of harm from like simple health and life to also integrating mental health into the picture. And so what was that phenomenon like? Like, what was that feeling like to have that switch, and how do you see the world now?
It was neither an epiphany or, a deep change within me. I just failed to consider the emotional harm that not being able to hug people would cause, because I just didn't consider it. And I am smarter for it now, and it is integrated. It's a valuable lesson to realize how important human interaction is, not for at an individual level, but for society as a whole, to be able to freely go around and enjoy their lives.
Right, absolutely. And you said you had a second story?
Yeah. So it's kind of embarrassing, but or no, not embarrassing. It's kind of sweet. I recognized what it means to love someone, and I mean this outside of an erotic erotic sense. I mean love as in to love someone. It was triggered. It was triggered just a few months ago, and I just didn't know what I was feeling at that time. And then
Right.
I asked Twitter, funnily enough, I asked
Uh-huh.
Twitter, hello, friends, what is love? And
Right.
I got into a conversation with someone, and they showed me by telling stories about themselves and showing themselves to me, they showed me what love is and how to do it. And I am deeply grateful to that person. And
Mm.
with that, I slotted it into my mental framework of the world. Of course, I loved my family very much even before, but I
Hmm.
didn't know how to go about loving someone outside my family who I didn't love before. And I recognize now that to some extent my romantic relationships before, I didn't really cultivate this, it makes me feel kind of sappy, but real love or true love
Right.
within those relationships. And this mostly stemmed from the fact that I was unable to love myself at that time. I think this ties into philosophy because it makes me able to manipulate these concepts in my mind, and I have the language and the framework to consider such things in abstract manners. Of course, reading literature has contributed so much as well. So
Hmm.
philosophy doesn't get to take all the credit. Then again, reading philosophy has helped me appreciate art a lot more.
Yeah, and the way I'm kind of picturing this as you're going through the world and allowing these ideas to compete and harmonize and result in different perspectives. It's almost like an RPG where you have one slot for an item. They could be leggings or boots or whatever, and you pick it up and you have to like look at all the stats and compare it side by side, and then you drop the old one and move forward with a new one.
Well,
Which that's a weird example, but
no,
it's kind of
I
like
think
that.
you nailed it except for one part.
Yeah.
The old item isn't discarded, it is
Right.
kept in case it still turns out to be useful. Because
Right.
I think having, for example, having been you know a political, true believer, and getting upset at and political things, it's a useful perspective to have for empathizing with such people
Right. No, that's
and
true. So you find new
understanding.
uses. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And this old perspective, I am very glad I had this experience, even though I did a lot of harm to myself with it
Hmm.
mentally. I am so glad to have that experience because it allows me to empathize with people more, and it allows me to understand the world around me better. These old ideas, they don't go anywhere. They just, they get shifted around a bit and tinkered and then stored away for a rainy day when they might be picked up again.
While you were studying philosophy, have you ever like gone the wrong path or seen that happen to anyone else where philosophy was used to a bad purpose rather than to the good? And how can people be careful about how they're using philosophy?
Well, when I went into self-exile, I justified it to myself by saying to myself, let's try out nihilism for a while and let's see how it goes. And I
Hmm.
got kicked out of school. I got fired from my job. It did not
Wow.
go well, and it took me almost 2 years, to recover and to. Um, I am in the process of recovering from that, and this Twitter
Wow.
experience is a part of opening up and trying new things and interacting with people again, and it's going really
Yeah.
well. These ideas have real power, like I said before, and as with any power, it is easy to mismanage it, and especially when you slightly misunderstand what is meant. Because what I was doing wasn't nihilism. There's actually a very interesting dream about nihilism I had. But what I was doing was, just kind of giving up and then justifying it as a philosophical experiment, which it just wasn't. It was just me being, not nice to myself. Because even all those misanthropic writers, they all had a wife and kids.
Right.
I had a dream. I don't even remember when. Could have been a couple of months ago. Mm-hmm. Everything a couple of months ago with me, it seems.
Yeah. I feel the same way. Everything that happened in my childhood, it was when I was 12.
Yeah.
But go on.
I had a dream where, I was there, but nothing had a name. It's very difficult to describe, but I looked at, what would be the ground, and no thoughts would emerge because it ceased to have any meaning contained within it. And I think it was a very scary experience. It lasted 5 seconds, but it, in my dream, but it stuck with me. And I think that is real nihilism, is the complete loss of, all experience. You're there, but there's nothing. It's just a void. And I don't think, or maybe it is attainable. I don't know. Reading some Buddhist texts, it kind of sounds like that. But to me, it sounds like the most horrifying fate possible.
Right. Well, it sounds like the dangerous kind of disassociation, right? Where a lot of my interpretation of like meditation and seeking enlightenment is becoming more embodied and more present and more aware. But yeah, that sounds kind of like the opposite of that to me in some ways.
Yeah, exactly. You get it. You get it exactly. Very good. It's very difficult to convey these sorts of experiences in words, and I'm glad we have a bridge of some sorts.
Oh, absolutely. So the object of this show is to try and figure out how philosophy leads to a better life. And some of my interpretation of that is seeing philosophy through the lens of coping, because a lot of philosophy is used to better understand the world or to solve certain kinds of problems. But coping is very similar in that we have these problems that we approach, and we either put on this kind of armor or this defense, or we do something to our own emotions. And even though philosophy is the love of wisdom or the friend of wisdom, they're both interacting with the world and with problems. I'm curious how you interpret coping, and how you think it applies to philosophy, or what place it has.
I definitely feel like I'm misusing philosophy, because many philosophers consider philosophy as an abstract search for truth, and I'm definitely not doing that. Mm-hmm. Or so it kind of feels. But yeah, the main uses of philosophy for me are, constructing various elaborate copes to make my life better. And intentionally, yes. And of course, it is very easy, again, to construct copes that will harm you in the long term. Right. But I believe that if you tinker them just right, they can significantly improve human lives and induce human flourishing. Well, I really hope that you don't take this the wrong way. But for example, Christianity is a type of cope. And I'm absolutely not saying that God isn't real. I believe in a God, maybe not in the same terms as you do, but I absolutely do believe in God. But I do think that belief is a cope. That doesn't mean that I don't hold that belief sincerely, but I do think it is a cope. And
I've never seen it that way. I've never thought of that, unpack that myself.
Yeah. I'm sorry if I triggered anything bad, but that's just the way that I approach these subjects. And I think that philosophy is the most magnificent way to build copes. It is truly wonderful to use.
Through what mechanism? Like, if it's the most magnificent way to construct copes, like, what makes it the most magnificent way, and how are they doing that?
To give you a easy pipeline from earlier, I read Kierkegaard, and I read the passage where Kierkegaard describes how Abraham is going to sacrifice his son and what his possible motives might be, and it really made me empathize with religious people and Abraham and Kierkegaard himself, and struggles with doubt. And in that sense, philosophy first then broke away a bad cope, that isn't real and all that exists is a material world, because of course that is to some extent a cope as well. And then reading forward, he attempts his best to explain how he would approach being a Christian. And through those words, I built my own interpretation of them, and then that became a new cope, which replaced the old one, which afforded then magic and other mystical events to happen in my life.
The way I'm interpreting this is that a lot of the normal copes we have are in some way kind of ingrained in our DNA, that our brain is structured in such a way that if something very dangerous occurs to us that like triggers a certain salience vector, then we become traumatized, right? And then we have a physical response to this trauma, and our brain has a way to use sleep and other things in order to try to resolve that trauma, and it's not always successful. To protect oneself from the intensity of life, our body and our brains are structured to follow a certain process. A lot of this results in people developing phobias and having a series of neuroses of a kind that existed to serve them in order to protect them from a certain degree of intensity. And what it sounds like is you're pointing at, instead of a genetic vector for cope, it's a mimetic vector for cope,
absolutely.
right?
That's great. That's a great way to put it. Although I would disagree. I'd say that ultimately we are all successful in being healed, because once we die, we are completely healed of all ailments.
Yeah.
Some people
the
find
old death is it's too much of a good thing, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's say that this is a very grim way to look at things, but I think it's always, a very, very comforting thought that one day, I love being alive. I love this land and I love the world, but someday it's my time to go, and I shall too be healed.
Well, speaking of going, I'm gonna let you go soon. Did you have any closing remarks? Anything you wanted to wrap up or touch on?
Yeah, I can't not show my blog. Read my blog, you fuckers.
All right, yeah, I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah,
for sure.
I got to show my blog.
Oh, we got to drive that traffic.
All right.
Anyway, Robert, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate all your ideas, and I've got a lot to chew over myself.
You do. I'm glad you do.
No, I've got to think about this whole Christianity as a cope thing. I feel like there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah, for sure.
Please don't lose faith because of me.
No worries right
there,
Rob. Anyway, thanks for coming on. I'll talk to you today, probably a little bit later.
All right.
I'll see you.
See you.
I had an awesome time recording this episode with Robert. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can subscribe to future episodes and read show notes on my blog, www.becomingcreature.substack.com. You can find Robert at ChilderMass4 on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at BecomingCritter. Feel free to say hi. I'm very grateful for the intro music, which was mixed by Frank Ivey, spelled Frankeyeevee. And this has been A Becoming Creature. We hope you enjoyed.